5:30 Mountain Time, and we're grateful for you taking the time to kind of just get an update as the progress for this last week. We'll focus just 30 minutes on maybe tools, technologies, and kind of bring you up to speed on what we've accomplished over the last week. Provide any kind of feedback or opportunity for feedback, maybe any recommendations or thoughts or guidance. And then we'll also spend some time, I'll go ahead and pop this into a different mode here. And we'll also spend some time going over some things that are happening in the world and then just get feedback on it. Some of it, a lot of it is different parts of the world. So since we've got such a broad audience here, I'd like to be able to get feedback from different perspectives because everyone is seeing this roll out in different ways. I know we've got probably 6 or 7 different countries and many different time zones all here. Grateful for the co-hosts here. I know we've got Terrence, Elle, Wally. Thank you for taking the time to be fielding questions and just be here and be present. We just appreciate your energy. And for those in the different rooms, so Ripple Effect, Digital World, Town Hall, thanks for taking the time. As a reminder, this is a private membership association. Some of the things we'll talk about are inside of this private membership association. We'll talk a lot about that as far as some of the future things that we'll go through, but these private membership associations are actually tied and constitutionally protected. So just know that there's a big part of it. Some things we talk about maybe in the future. So please don't speculate, don't gamble, but this is a clause that has to be thrown in there. Simple things we'll talk about is how phone connects in with storage and how a simple model of building an operating system for servers on the right can create a decentralized architecture for phones to plug into to replace really Google, Microsoft, Apple, all the centralized systems to allow the individual to be able to own their own identity. One of the first things I want to talk about, and it's not showing all of it, is the progress that's been made over this last week as it relates to being able to implement one new use case. So we already know that there's a decentralized phone, there's decentralized ID, there's decentralized logins, there's decentralized companies, and this basically ties to decentralized assets that can be registered in the real world. Maybe it's a motorcycle, maybe it's a boat, maybe it's a vehicle. And this video stream that I'm showing here, let's see if I can pop this off so you can kind of see it in real time. So here's an example of one in the real time, so to speak. This is the first mock-up. You'll notice they're pretty, when you look at them, they're pretty hefty. They're heftier than a normal. I know license plates all around the world come in different sizes and different shapes. There's some that actually have embossed, so the engravings actually are higher. Some that actually have the ability to see letters when there's reflections. And it actually just so happens that this is actually designed with cameras, it actually doesn't get picked up. Now, it's not that there's trying to be evasion, but privacy is a part of freedom. Our founding fathers, at least in America, understood that. And so when they fast forward, for instance, I actually just yesterday, I went to meet with, and I don't want to go through names at this stage, but just yesterday I went to meet with a gal who actually has a case with the Supreme Court or the federal court within the United States of America because she was pulled over. And she was pulled over because her registration wasn't current, which, by the way, these will not have perpetual registration sites to them. It will be unlimited. As long as you don't sell the vehicle. If it transfers title to someone else, then there's a fine line between keeping the individual safe and free and the officers safe and alive. I mean, there's a real threat with officers about needing to know who they're dealing with. Is this vehicle, does it have weapons in it? And even if there's weapons, there needs to be a whole nother level of dialogue there, which we'll talk about in a second. But the point that I'm trying to drive at is imagine more transparency than is currently realized. So imagine a plate, and I'll be specific. This gal was not treated right.
Hey, excuse me, Michael. We're only seeing the mock-up of the digital plate and no video, no.
Yeah, in your world, that's what you'll see. But here, I'll go ahead and there's 3 or 4 different areas. It'll take me longer to try and get, but here I'll go ahead and show it to you. So this is it for those that are on different channels. So you can kind of see it's a thick piece of aluminum. They also do it on stainless steel, but you'll notice that it's actually flat. And the way that it's printed, it's a form of reflective. So cameras, most cameras don't actually pick them up, which is a whole nother conversation. But the point that I was trying to make was, I went to meet with this woman. She's very intelligent, very well educated. She's a mother of an amazing family, amazing husband, kids. Her oldest son is about the age of my son, my oldest son. They also went to the same university. It's in northern Utah. And it just so happens that when I was away in the Pacific, I didn't even know about this or hear about it or even see anything about it until yesterday. And when I saw it yesterday, I made some phone calls, I sent some emails, I sent some texts, and I got in my car. And I found out, I couldn't find where she lives, but I found out where she works. And the reason that I went to visit her was in February of this year, maybe it was March, her son was killed. He was killed because he understood what it meant to be free. And he did not have a license plate that pulled up in the existing system. He was pulled over. He was respectful. He complied. He just said, I won't give you my name. I'll give you, he actually gave them his passport, and they tried to take him out of the car. Now, this is someone that's done nothing wrong. There's no moving violation. There's no criminal activity. They literally were just exercising a process, a procedure. Now, you got to back up, and at least I want to make an underscore around law enforcement. I personally believe, now I grew up in foster homes with an amazing family that went and got their foster license to take me, and he was in law enforcement. I was the only foster child they had. Wonderful family. And he inbred in me a massive respect for law enforcement. I was able to see from the inside of what officers go through. Now, this was LA County Sheriff officers. And I mean, you think about it, they live a life to serve the public. And majority of them, when they retire, which they're not like military, they don't retire young, but when they retire, the average life expectancy is about 18 months from LA County Sheriff officers. So think about that. Because of how they operate, the adrenaline, the pressures, the push, not only that, but you talk about life and life balance and the sacrifices. Majority of them are divorced because of the lifestyle. But the point that I'm trying to drive at is safety for the officers is very, very important. But there's also a fine line for society to be able to be free. And what we're doing our darndest to do, and I'm going to try and turn back on so we can take this off here on a couple different sharing systems here. So what we're doing our darndest to do is to be able to not only just offer, different types of passports or IDs or residencies or even elements of citizenship from different countries, but in the digital world, the jurisdiction is really the earth. In different countries, it may be their physical country. In different states, it may be their different states. One of the questions are, like, there's a lot of people from Canada on this call. If I go from Wyoming to Utah, how is that looked at from policy and procedure within Utah? If I then go all the way up through Yellowstone and cross the border, and let's say I'm in Alberta, Canada, how is that looked at? So now I have a US plate, Wyoming, up in Alberta. So my point is there's different jurisdictions, there's different policies, but when you look at it, there's a perspective of what is the country's law and what is the state's law, and then what will actually prevail. And what this woman is doing is she's actually going federally and going after these different police departments for their overreach. And when I say overreach, I got to say that very carefully because it's important for them to stay alive as well. I don't know if folks know, like Lavoy Finicum. That man was a Marine. Talk about a good man. He was a foster parent to 20 plus kids. He was a rancher. He would stand up for his neighbors. and he was standing up for a neighbor, and he was killed in cold blood, if you ask me. But that's a different conversation. I won't even get into that. But my point is these people that stand up, they're trying to stand up and do what's right, not to be disrespectful, not to not comply with what real law is, but to try and even provide a process to actually educate the existing system. Why? Because authority also comes from decentralized principles. Like we've said before, in the United States of America, the authority was actually decentralized. It was pushed down to the counties, namely the county sheriff. But do the county sheriffs really understand what the law of their county is as it relates to identification, whether it's for the individual, a vehicle, etc.? And a big part of that is actually registration. So if a vehicle is registered within a jurisdiction, and then that jurisdiction, for instance, Wyoming, so today's the 18th of this month, is that right? Yeah, the 18th of the month, 18 days ago, the state of Wyoming enacted in law, so this has actually gone through all legislation, it's enacted now, that in the state of Wyoming, you don't need to go through safeties and emissions for vehicles that are over a certain age, and you don't have to get a renewal every single year. So think about that. You don't have to renew your vehicle's little tags every year. So you don't have to get a new little number that says 2024 6, so May of 2024, whatever. You don't have to do that anymore. So and by the way, Wyoming is doing some amazing things. They have done more in aligning legislation with decentralized systems than any other, literally, I may even have a document on it, than any other state in the United States that I've seen. Now, there's other countries, like Dubai has done some crazy stuff. For instance, their whole registration system for all their vehicles is already there, but they don't have the same. Well, I could argue they have some very interesting. Just go and Google the police vehicles in Dubai, and you'll start understanding what I'm talking about. But this is a very serious topic. How can we be free? How can we create that fine line of balance? So some of you have seen, I don't know if I've got a slide up on it. There's really a fine line of balance. Let's see if I can find it here, of how we can create government to be able to do its job, the jobs that were intended, and for the individual that's a citizen of that government to actually still be free. It's a fine balance. So think about the ability for an officer to actually get a ton of intelligence from a system just like this. So let's say they pull someone over, they can scan the vehicle through following a process, right? So now they can actually see, when was this vehicle registered? Who was it registered to? Where is it registered? Is it insured? You know, in certain states, that's just the law. And when you dig into that, there's a whole other conversation there. But insurance is one of the topics. Ownership is a topic. Not just ownership, but also drivers is a topic. And when you tie a lot of this stuff down, when you can cryptographically actually balance it, think about it this way. What if insurance actually got less expensive because of providing transparency, but you didn't have to give up your privacy? So for instance, there will be a time when the individuals can actually own the data around the cameras on their car. So whether it's a motorcycle or whether it's a Volvo, all Volvos by 2025 will be electric. By the way, they're using an operating system from Google. They're garbage. It's the whole system. The vehicles are probably some of the best well-rounded vehicles, because on one hand, you have Teslas they don't have the stability and the solid vehicle feel like you get with a Mercedes or a BMW or even a Volvo, but you have the future. You have an operating system, you have driverless capabilities that are just far surpassed any other technology out there. But the point that I'm trying to drive at is that it's the software that will enable the actual individual to be able to start gaining their own privacy and freedoms. So imagine a QR code just like this that pulls up a bunch of data, and it can even pull up a photo of a driver. But you know what? Without that driver actually verifying something, they don't get more data, or the driver can actually choose not to display it. Because right now, every one of us are being profiled in systems, But do we have the rights to share the data that we want shared, or remove the data, or hide the data that's inaccurate or not, we don't want shared? So the point is it puts the control back in the individual's hands to be able to disclose as much or as little as they want. And if they're pulled over, they can verify through a simple scan the ability to actually show who they are without giving up their mobile phone. When we start talking about digital IDs, majority of the world are talking about giving your phone to an officer. There has to be a lot of trust when you actually go and do that, because from there, and you let's back up like 50 years. Majority of us on this call, when we actually went through the adolescent years, we didn't have the same level of perceived control, or our parents didn't, that they do nowadays. So I'm the father of this beautiful clan. Now this is like a way old picture, but if I threaten, for instance, my two youngest kids did something that was crazy and it was wrong, and my better half literally said, and she usually doesn't take the stance, I'm usually the one that does. She said, your phones are gone. And she was serious, like dead serious, like they disappeared for months and months. But the point that I'm driving at is this next generation is also addicted to this device that's in their pocket, like literally. And that's another thing, is it's when we talk about addictions, whether we're talking about drugs, whether we're talking about pornography, whether we're talking about any of the things that are natural, it could be as simple as a drink. Our body becomes dependent on it. Our mind becomes dependent on it. Any of those types of things. Maybe it's gambling. Maybe it's those things take away from our ability to actually choose. And when we talk about freedom within the digital world or within the clear companies, when we talk about decentralization, it's all about choosing. You can still choose what you want to choose. And there's no right or wrong depending on who you are, right? I mean, some people say, you know what, there's black and white. There is right or wrong. But the digital world is about decentralization, not about dictating values, virtues, morals. Those are still something that the individual needs to have the autonomy to be able to choose. But when we talk about implementing it into the real world, we can't just stand up and say, I'm going to follow the same policies and procedures that are out there in the world, let's say a traffic stop, but I'm also going to stand up for freedom and for what's right. So there's this fine balance. There is a young man who's not breathing anymore because an officer wanted to put hands on after they identified him. I don't know. I don't even understand how they can do that, but hopefully the supposed courts will figure that out. But the point is this young man is not living anymore. This young man's family wakes up with him not there. He won't create. He won't have posterity the same way that was intended. There's so much that's just changed because he stood up for what was right. The key is, how can we all stand up for what we perceive as right, but also not put ourselves in harm's way? And so as we go through the process of turning on these new systems, when I say systems, I'm talking about, let's see if I can pull this back up. I'm talking about maybe it's a registration process. Maybe it's a marriage process. Maybe it's a simple license process. By the way, there's a whole nother registration thing that I'll talk a lot about next week, but these simple changes can also change the dialogue. It can imagine when you get a plate, you also get a packet that has your registration in it, and it also explains the law. We try and enable people to take the emotion and the threat out of it so that education can happen not only in an awareness around the individuals that are involved, the citizens, the residents, but also around the officers. Maybe it's military. By the way, and I'll just throw this out there. I don't know if folks saw this, but today is the 18th. 5 days ago, this was actually mandated in the United States of America, ordering the selected reserve and certain members of individuals ready reserve of the armed forces into active duty. This is a compelling event for folks that understand what this means. This is a very big topic. So I'll go ahead and just I'll have Alex read this real quick.
By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including sections 121 and 12,304 of Title 10, United States Code, I hereby determine that it is necessary to augment the active armed forces of the United States for the effective conduct of Operation Atlantic Resolve in and around the United States European Command's area of responsibility.
So I'll stop there. I think you get the point. I'm not going to dig into this any further, but it is news that's definitely worthy for this last week. And we'll stop there. These are some other topics that are very important, and I hope we have enough time to kind of get through these, but let's jump into, by the way, remember we always talk about a private membership association when we start these meetings? You know what is one of the biggest private membership associations in the world today? The American Association of Motor Vehicles Administrators. So what they do is they basically help different databases. So these are all the databases. And this is not just in North America, but also not just in the US, but also North America. So for those from Canada, you also subscribe to the same system. You have a different map, but imagine these different databases, and then it layers over what the states actually do and what their policies are in handling certain things. Imagine if the digital world actually plugs in its data, so the numbers, into these same basic systems. So they also come up on the actual officer system. But imagine it comes up, but it has a digital surname. All the other data is there. This vehicle is registered to this jurisdiction. Maybe it's the digital world, maybe it's Wyoming, maybe it's Tuvalu, but it's registered, okay? Check. This vehicle, so for instance, it won't flag out folks to get pulled over. There's other individuals that literally don't even use plates, and they go drive around, and they have the same, actually better experiences. But the point that I'm driving at is, imagine complying with the existing membership association, so this organization here, and actually registering within their existing systems, and then automatically having that update state by state, province by province. So I'll go ahead and leave that at that. Those are the things that we're currently working on, is actively setting up registration systems that can actually touch real world use cases. So in this case, vehicle registration, vehicle license plates, and then it'll also tie into the identity stuff that we've all been talking about for so long. The difference is everything is the same. It pulls up in the same database, has different, it's a plate, it has different numbers, but it doesn't give away the full name of the driver, the owner. It uses derived keys. For those that are not aware, this string of characters here is a derived key. This last 6 of them is actually a combination. And we believe that so when people talk about crypto, it's short for cryptography, which is really just math. What we've gone through the process of doing is, depending on how many different variations, so how many jurisdictions, whether it's the digital world with Earth, or maybe it's Tuvalu, maybe it's Tuvalu with Earth, which is another conversation. Maybe it's Wyoming with just the US. But the point that I'm driving at is, depending on how many different driver's licenses and how many different variants of driver's licenses, we believe that just 6 characters can actually span the whole Earth. So literally, this same sequence and structure can actually span the whole Earth. There's about 300 million vehicles in North America alone, 330 million citizens in the country. So you can see, people have 2.6 vehicles per person. But the point that I'm driving at, per driving person, I should say, because the kids are not including that. But I hope you can see the amount of the direction, the work, the effort. And I'll turn it over. If anybody has questions, thoughts, feedback on kind of the report out, we can wrap that up. And then I'll jump into some other topics after that, depending on where the conversation goes. So if you're on the Ripple Effect, which is at rippleeffect.clear.events, the digital world, or the town hall, feel free to raise your hand and ask a question. If you have one, make a comment. Even if you think, yeah, go ahead. Whoever just did that, you can just unmute.
Thank you, Michael. It's Terence in the Gold Coast in Australia. Just had a recent health scare. When you lay in a hospital bed, some things have become apparent to you. whilst laying there, there was a story of a man in New South Wales in Australia who's just won his case or is dismissed out of court because he doesn't need to pay tolls as per the Australian Constitution, which is, I believe, based on the US Constitution. So I've always sort of been aware around, our constitutional rights are read travel versus commercial travel, having to have number plates and all that for commercial travel, but essentially not personal travel. So I've made some commitments myself, which I want to work with you on, to potentially become a dual citizen of Tuvalu, and then also register my vehicle here in Queensland and carry these plates and push boundaries and take this into the real world. So that's one statement I'm going to make publicly now, is I'm committed to that. And secondly, in Australia, the Australian corporation known as government is also really locking down on censoring data. And I now have to come out of San Francisco with my VPN because I can't even get content now on Telegram through the national carrier here, which is Telstra.
Wow.
And Telstra have been working with the government since '76 and very good at creating these gateways and control systems. So anyway, that's my statement for today.
What's interesting is in 2007, as you know, we built an operating system, ClearOS server, that basically had content filtering and packet prioritization and some new things at the server layer. We also have, ClearOS mobile. I think we failed at doing it at the mobile layer, which that's a different conversation. But in 2007, the Australian government and Parliament passed a law that they wanted to filter all pornography from the country. They actually found us, flew us down there, and the government set up meetings directly with Telstra, Optus, and Vodafone. And there was one other that I'm forgetting. 4 different internet carriers, and the government's law saying that all pornography should be filtered. So if people wanted to get it, they would actually have to do similar to what you're talking about. They just jump on a VPN and get out, as they're not coming out of the country. But they wanted to do it at the ISP level, the cellular level. Now, this is 2007. We met with all these different companies, and the company said, we don't want to do this because we're going to impact our customers' experience and violate freedom of speech acts, okay? So remember what I talked about earlier, we got virtues, morals, we got values, there's different perspectives, but in the end, the responsibility comes from, is it from government? Is it from the carrier? What's crazy is now we're actually going to start seeing it come from these centralized systems. Just like what you talked about. You can't get to certain information because the cellular provider has actually blocked it. Remember in Nigeria, what they basically did was they said there's so much fraud in the whole country of Nigeria, everyone is going to get an ID and a credit card all in the same thing. So you get an ID and you have a credit card in Nigeria. For those of you that have been on this call for a long time, you remember this. And then they said, okay, well, great. Now you can actually transact. So you can have your ID and a card. Wonderful. Now you're going to link it up to a phone. You're going to download an app and you're going to put your number in. So they're going to link your IMEI number with your number from your country and literally talk about control. That is ultimate control. CBDC is easy to roll out once they link those systems together. And what was interesting was even in Nigeria, you had, I don't remember how many millions of people, but you had millions of people that stood up and said, no, we will not do that. They went out to the streets, they rioted. I don't believe in rioting. That's not the right thing. That's not what we're pushing, but they rioted. And they literally also went and hacked into these systems And they, not only that, they basically shut the systems down, copied the data from the centralized systems to prove that it wasn't. And that's why this type of architecture, when we talk about these systems with this architecture, that's why this is so imperative. A decentralized architecture where the storage is only accessed by the individual, by a finger from the individual, by a derived key that they own, not some centralized Google or Apple or Microsoft or other ecosystems. It's literally owned by the individual. So I guess the point is, back in those days, 2007, it did not happen. Even though I was a part of the solution trying to get it to happen, they said, no, it's not right. Freedom of speech is violated. And when you come back to America, it's the same argument. And you know what? I actually agree with it. Do I agree with the darkness that's out there online? By the way, if you haven't heard or watched the movie Sound of Freedom, please go do it. Please go do it. These are wonderful people. The night that they announced what they were doing, I was there in the room. We helped raise money for them. We helped serve them. And this was like, I don't know, 12 years ago, a long time ago, probably even longer. No, it was probably 2013, something like that. Anyways, other thoughts or comments on the topics that we've discussed so far before I jump on to one that's definitely related, but.
Hey, Michael, it's Becca from Australia. How are you?
Good.
Just a quick question. So do you have to be a resident or a citizen before you can get one of those plates? Is that how it works?
That's a really good question. Right now, we're trying to get, in this different organization, this association, we're trying to get approved from the digital world and one country. I won't be specific, and we're going to try and do one state. So once that gets done, we'll know what the requirements are, whether it's, anybody can sign up as a member. I'm going to pull up a new site here. It's going to be at digitalworld.earth. I'm going to click on services, and I'm going to click on membership. This is a really good page to answer any kind of questions that you may have as it relates to the difference between them. So member, resident, citizen, these are different apps and different things that may be included, may not be included. By the way, Wally, can we take a task to ping Shiv on this particular URL? Because there's some stuff in here that needs to be updated. There's some better code. But basically, it goes through the difference from a framework around becoming a resident or a citizen of particularly the digital world. There's going to be also requirements within different countries and even states. And we're also working with some key counties as well. So, pay attention to that if you would, but really good question. And right now we don't know the direct answer to it. So keep asking.
No worries. I really, really like this idea. I think it's great. I really, really like it. It's just, it just takes people to actually change and think different. People are just thinking the same, they're just going back to their old ways.
That's a really good way to put it. It's going back to their old ways. Because that's really, it's like most of us don't remember when getting pulled over. I'm trying to find when getting pulled over and being profiled like this was the same way. When we grew up, did they have cameras that tracked everybody that drives around? No. When they pulled us over, did they actually have to read our ID and get to know us? Yeah. Were they more safe then than they are today? Well, I personally can't answer that. I'm going to try and let's see if I can find some photos here. No, it's not going to come up. So that's a really good question. Any other thoughts or questions before we jump topics? Feedback on what you've seen, what you've heard? We're going to go down some pretty different roads. So if you want to talk about any of the developments on the license plate or process or associations. Okay. Go ahead.
every week I'm on these calls and I'm listening to, everything that you're developing and that you're doing for us and for humanity. And more, I'm feeling so violated by every system that's out there. It's just unbelievable. I just feel violated. It's incredible.
Well, on that point, I'll go ahead and jump to the next topic. And this jumps to a country. Parlez-vous en français? If you have
Oui.
it. Yeah. So here we go.
Economic Forum has been quietly granted backdoor access to billions of cell phones as part of a plot to compile blacklists of users who hold politically incorrect views and commit wrongspeak. According to a World Economic Forum insider, these blacklists of so-called deplorables will be used to assign social credit scores to people before the social credit scheme is officially rolled out in the next few years. Klaus Schwab's evil plan is playing out to perfection in France, where WEF puppet Emmanuel Macron has granted the global elite permission to spy on every single French citizen by turning on the camera and microphones of their cell phones without a warrant or any kind of notification.
Did you just get that?
Yeah, I heard it.
So-
Absolutely.
So,
Wow.
I mean, we used to have viruses that did this, right? So within Telegram or WhatsApp, people really wouldn't know this, but they could actually send from a certain phone number if they got a text. They didn't even have to click on it, but there's a remote payload. And this is real. I've actually wrote a bunch of blog posts on it a long time ago, where people can actually remotely initiate the video feed, the microphone feed, and one other feed that I forget right now. But think about that. That was through a virus and targeted. This is a whole country that can just do it. And so I went from America, and in America, everything's open. Everybody can do everything. You're not supposed to be surveilled, and then the Patriot Act comes in, and now everybody except for Americans gets surveilled because, it's external. And then I moved to New Zealand for a couple of years. And in New Zealand, they basically said, no, everyone gets surveilled, just get used to it. And when we look at what's going on in Australia and New Zealand, you're already living that, right? And then when we look at what's going on in France, to have this as a normal, and I said, you know what, who's this third party? Is this really valid? Is this real? Let me see if I can, I actually pulled up some validating sources. Let's see if I can find it.
Klaus Schwab is a virus.
I'll let this play out while I'm continuing.
Before we
to find
dive
this
in,
other
subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and join the people murdered across the entire country. French police and the mainstream media can't even keep track of which towns have been totally burned to the ground. The chaos in France is coming to America. If anybody thinks it's not, they're delusional. How do we know the chaos is coming to America? Because it's orchestrated by the elite. Klaus Schwab warned us to get ready for an angrier world.
So here's third party. So it's separate from this gentleman just going off. But if you look at it, this is literally 6th of July. So, a week ago, and exactly what he's talking about. This is it's not just the phones, but the actual cameras within the systems, within the government that they've already put up. So it's crazy stuff. I'll drop some of this stuff in. I'll let this guy continue to go, but here, I'll drop it in the notes.
And it has now become clear exactly why he wants to rule over a divided society.
We will see definitively a lot of anger already now, but probably increased by the end of the year, because this crisis will be with us until we really have found a remedy. So we have to prepare for a more angry world.
The riots have given Schwab's puppet president, Macron, the excuse to quietly roll out the most invasive surveillance law ever enacted anywhere outside of George Orwell's worst nightmares. France's WEF-penetrated parliament has voted to approve the new clause in the Justice Reform Bill, allowing police to turn on the cameras and microphones in a host of smart devices belonging to citizens for up to 6 months for the crime of wrongthink. This is the exact replica of the surveillance apparatus deployed in China to ensure social obedience and deference to the communist central government. This should come as no surprise, as Schwab has been praising the Chinese social credit score system for years and declaring that it's a model for the West. A good score brings you benefits, while a low score gets you blacklisted. You can't get a decent job, book tickets, or a hotel room, and your children can't even attend a good school. Your life can be switched off at any time.
A good score brings benefits, but people with low scores lose rights. The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens.
It's a matter of principle. Those people have to be condemned.
Those people aren't honest, so they have to pay the price.
It's only right to pay your debts. You have to blacklist those that don't.
The Supreme Court has created a blacklist for so-called bad citizens, those whose ratings have dropped to 0. On it are companies, but also 23 million people to date. Among them is this journalist, Liu Hu. He got a little too close to uncovering corruption among high-profile party members. After being sued for defamation by the subject of a story he'd written, he was blacklisted. He only realized when he tried to buy a train ticket and was told he was banned from traveling.
That tells me I'm still on the blacklist.
Punished because he's been branded untrustworthy by the state.
Once you're blacklisted, you can no longer get a bank loan, start a business, buy an apartment, or even send your children to a private school.
This future is just 2 years away for the citizens of WF-penetrated France. After this quick break, we'll explain exactly how we know this and what we can do to fight back.
So there's a lot to this. I think you get the point around how digital surveillance and centralization will enable the future. And when we talk about the future, so you started touching on some things around defamation, around debt, around business, around credit lines. And that's how they're literally what they're going to do is just create, issue money, cash money like we've never seen. And so the things that we've currently actually purchased or spent money on, the value of them, if it's like real property, some could argue that values of cars, which normally depreciate, have actually gone up. For instance, I actually went to a dealership yesterday and I drove up, and my first words out of my mouth were, because they'll have people that are in the car lots selling cars. I just rolled down my window and I says, "Where's all your cars?" And we can't keep anything in stock. And there's reasons for it. But all I'm driving at is things are going to cost more money. They're going to inject money into the systems. And maybe on this next, I'm going to jump to another video here. I'm going to jump topics. So please know that I'm jumping topics. We're coming off of one that's around cell phones and another into financial topics. So here we go.
Going ahead at breakneck speed, the globalist elite are implementing their plan to utilize CBDCs embedded under the skin, aiming to abolish the Second Amendment. The World Economic Forum has called on Western nations to urgently ban cash and implement a Chinese-style social credit score system amid growing public rejection of the globalist agenda. The WEF urged world leaders to begin fast-tracking the implementation of CBDCs during the summer Davos events last week. For years now, the globalist elite have been telling us about their plan to seize control of every aspect of our lives and turn the world into a giant prison. But most people have preferred to cover their ears and pretend nothing is awry. Unfortunately for the sheeple, the days of being able to pretend everything is okay are rapidly coming to an end. Before we dive in, subscribe to the channel if you have.
So I hope you're kind of understanding what he's digging through. We'll see if this.
Think about the benefits of digital money. There are huge potential gains. It's not just about digital forms of physical currency. You can have programmability. Units of central bank currency with expiry dates. You could have, as I argue in my book, a potentially better and some people might see it as a darker world where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable, like, say, ammunition or drugs or pornography or something of the sort. And that is very powerful in terms of the use of a CBDC.
The WEF has declared that all citizens must be implanted with the CBDC microchip in the very near future in order to be able to fully participate in society.
Remember when this was just a rumor and it was just out there? The technology really didn't exist, but they would talk about this mark of the beast, and they talk about this type of thing where it connects something under the skin.
Technology is so advanced now. Like, you don't even need a microchip.
Yeah, you really don't. I mean, really, the same thing that they're talking
But
about.
this is so fear mongering. Like, this is so fear mongering, and it puts people into a state of perpetual fear. And I'm not having to pick a bar of it, to be quite honest. Like, all these news articles is just like, I'm so over it. We are the solution, and we need to keep acting like the solution, because we are the solution.
So that's exactly right, Becca. I'm gonna jump from what we're seeing here into real world and actually how it's implemented. Now, for those that have been paying attention, this is nothing new. You've seen me raise my hand. You've seen me show you these things before many, many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, these same types of systems. This is something that doesn't go under the skin. This is something that can actually communicate with the body through yes or no questions in real time. It can connect emotions and feelings and thoughts, just like lie detectors work, but a whole nother level to be able to understand. So if someone's at a location and they're experiencing something, this can literally see what people are feeling about this. This is not speculation. The same office that I've called you from for years, core pieces of this technology and understanding were understood. The developers behind this technology, they understand the importance of enabling it to be decentralized. And imagine a future where all the garbage that we just went through with this and with this, where literally a decentralized parallel system, can it communicate with the body? Yes, it can. Can it use machine learning and artificial intelligence to provide a level of healthcare that we can never think of? Yes, it can. Can it also be used for darkness? Yes, it can. But can it be decentralized where the individual still owns their own data and their own identity? I believe that there's a beautiful future ahead of us that can literally enable us to be a part of the solution. Not like the individual who stood up for what was right as a young man, following in footsteps of parents that were awake with their eyes open and doing what they can to be able to provide freedom and liberty in a country that was founded on it. There are solutions. It doesn't have to be this negative, terrible message around what systems, and whether it's the WEF or the IMF or whatever. I'm sorry, but we all have a choice. We all have a voice. And we're not dead because we're not all united today. There are people working on solutions in different parts of the world, in different parts of technology that do care. Has it been crazy and eye-opening to see what COVID's done and how many people would just blindly go and be a part of the message? Oh, be safe. Oh, get the jab. Oh, I mean, I won't even go into the details because you already understand what the dialogue is. But there can be a beautiful future, but we have to unite. We have to drive awareness for technology that's not coming, it's already here. But we have to do it in such a way where people can actually implement it, use it, be a part of the solution, and not a part of the fear. We need to have faith. Just like Jimmy Levy talked about that fear over faith, that's really what I'm talking about. And people know where that comes from. I'm gonna pull that up. By the way, there's a new song that's going to be written. It's not even written yet, but Jimmy Levy he's already agreed to do a fun new song. I met with some folks that were we were on top of a mountain just a couple days ago, and we had people from China, from Taiwan, from Mexico. We had young and we had old. We had people from Europe. And we were all talking about, it was weird how the conversation came up, but we were all talking about what's happening in society. And, we talked about what's happening in Taiwan and China, because these two people were from these two separate countries, and they both were in America, and both were believing the same thing. And you know what they were believing? That love is the way. Love is the way that we can stop the noise, stop the confusion, stop the pain. And you know what may get painful? But usually when things are painful and uneasy, change occurs, and it's usually for the better. In life, we have this pride cycle, and usually we get very prideful, and then we need to be taught a lesson, and it comes back around. It's a beautiful thing, but I'll allow any kind of questions if people have feedback or thoughts before I jump to kind of closing with Jimmy Fear Over Faith video. So thoughts, feedback?
Hey, Michael, it's back again. I just want to say to everyone on the call here, it definitely is faith over fear at any stage. Spiritual warfare at the moment is insane. And with like the digital space, it's like doubled in physical. All the manifestations from the digital realm manifest into the physical realm, and then it doubles. So rise above all of it, all of it, all of it, all of it. It's not as bad as we think. We just need to be a little bit brave.
Well put. Any other feedback from anyone before we hear from Jimmy?
Michael, I would just say that, whoever, what kind of religion you are, even if you're not religious, pray. We need to pray for the country, your country, our country. Pray for the world.
Amen.
And just, never give up. And I second that, what Becca said.
It's interesting that you say that, because this new song that's going to be written talks about Heavenly Mother and Heavenly Father and all the different words that humanity uses for names of God or Christ or however they intertwine them. And it's not about a religion, but we recognize that we all have physical mothers and fathers that are very important to life. The ability to procreate, I believe, is one of the biggest gifts we've been given. And it's one of the things that's under attack. But we don't see how we got here. And a lot of it is that fear over faith. I personally believe that we have an amazing Heavenly Mother that's usually not even mentioned. And we have a Heavenly Father, whether it's called Elohim or God or however you want to coin it. But this new song that's primarily around racism and around unity does touch on that. And so you're spot on, Susan. You're spot on. Prayer. And, for those that have watched kind of what we did with the health stuff, which is still coming, it's just a year or two off. It really is. Quantum entanglement is actually the scientific way of proving prayer is real. So, I personally, and most people don't know this, but you guys come onto this call and show and different channels and you ask questions, but you may not know how we got here. I was emancipated from the state of California at age 16. And I hitchhiked from California to Utah, where I was originally from. I was alone. I don't like to be alone, and I struggled being alone. But early in the mornings, I say prayers. And a prayer was, what am I supposed to do with my time here on earth? 16 years old. I was told you were supposed to use your mind and not your body. Because I was doing heavy labor, I would dig ditches and help build brick houses and crazy stuff. The next day I prayed, if I'm supposed to use my mind, which I really didn't think I was that smart, then what am I supposed to do? And the one word came back, it was technology. I didn't even understand what the word meant. This was the early 90s. I didn't even have a cell phone back then. There wasn't any, the internet wasn't there. None of this stuff was there. And I called my foster dad on a little landline, normal punch, the old punch phones. I called my foster dad and I said, I know what I'm supposed to do. By the way, he's an amazing man. I won't dig into that right now because I'll bawl if I do. But I said, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to work with technology. Do you know what that is? And he didn't even know what that was. This is the same gentleman that was LA County Sheriff. So, and that's where I got such a love for law enforcement and the things that they go through. But anyways, because I wanted to go into law enforcement. That's what I wanted to do, was to go into law enforcement. But I was told that I was supposed to go into technology. And he said, Mike, I don't know what that is, but I'll do some research. And I was doing research. He was doing research. Back then, the only thing I could research was like encyclopedias and newspapers and the phone book. Believe it or not, I got a ton out of the phone book. But he called me back in 3 days and he said, I know what technology is, or at least this variant. He was living over in Aurora, Colorado at this time. And he bumped into a guy that worked for Xerox. Now, Xerox was one of the original. So if people understand open source, it goes like crazy. So Hewlett Packard, Xerox, AT&T, all the bells, those are some of the original companies in technology. But this guy was breaking off of Xerox and he was starting up a brand new business and he was looking for a mentor. And it just so happens this foster father of mine connected with him at the right time, reached out to me. I didn't even let time lapse. I went over there. I worked for this gentleman. I made $6,800 my first year, the whole year, full time. But it was an education like you can't imagine. A lot of it is around vocabulary and understanding. Some of you wonder why I have these walls with all these connections on them and these charts and how everything comes together. And these books, most of you, if you've been around me, you know that I've got these black books. It's like just huge. And the ability to be able to have what's called inductive versus deductive reasoning and thinking and understanding how to learn and how everything kind of came together. I was given an education and an understanding of systems. And then from there, I was dating a girl that's now my wife. I dated her for like 3 years, which, by the way, this last week came by 26 years of marriage together. And, I just have to pause at that because I wouldn't be able to do half, not even 20% of what I'm able to accomplish without her loving me and putting up with me. I am not perfect. I am very far from a perfect man. But this woman, she even sees things that are wrong and she helps to remove them, to make me stronger. But, we do a report out on the week and I don't want to forget that. So 26 years has been married to this wonderful angel and dated her for 3 years. So almost 30 years now. But for the first part of my career, I focused on centralized systems, and we were recognized as number one in the world in what we did, like literally third party, independent, blah, blah, blah. But I know that these decentralized systems are important for humanity. And I also know it does not revolve around me. When we talk about getting on our knees, or saying simple prayers, we all have the opportunity to tap into that organized intelligence in how we're here, whatever you want to call, whatever religion or book or whatever. We're all here. We're breathing in an atmosphere. We're communicating on, well, I don't know how many countries we're talking to right now, but it's all digital. This digital ecosystem was created spiritually before it's being created physically. And this simple example of a plate that goes onto a vehicle is just one more manifestation of that. This simple ring is just another manifestation of that. So I just want to say thank you, Susan, for the guidance to pray, because that is the one way that we'll be able to see our way through this. We've got to be humble and remove the guile and remove the pride and remove the egos. My wife tells me sometimes, you know, you wouldn't be where you're at without your ego, so don't get rid of it a ton. But I do believe that the word ego to me means etch God out. EGO. Wayne Dyer turned that light on for me long ago. And, you know, all of us have the opportunity to build relationships with one another and to get to know one another and share lives with one another. I'm grateful to share this time and this space with each of you. And I know that hopefully it'll be looked back in the future to validate. For those of you that have been following along, I'm going to pull this open and stop it real fast. So for those of you that have gone through and kind of been involved, you realize the digital world is basically an organization that isn't a company, but it's supported by lots of companies and partners, and the clear companies were the first ones to start it. There's lots of partners now. So if we come in to these providers now, you'll find there's a lot of different organizations that are involved today, right? But these clear companies had the ability to actually, and what I'll dive into is we back up, 13 years. So you can go all the way from 2023 all the way back to 2009 and dig into details. So you can literally, you see my old face here right now and kind of the team that's around. Let's jump back to 2009. The point that I'm making is this video stream replaced what these photos are. And in the future, this video stream will be cut up and remembered in such a way like we couldn't understand. So I'll see if I can find a. That's another thing. Wally, could we take a task to get the wired system set up? Because I'm streaming pretty slow here. So this team, there's probably about, so involved. He'll always be a core part. Involved. But this is actually parts and pieces of where it started so long ago. So this is 2009. So you can kind of understand it's just continuing to focus. It's kind of like what was talked about before. We don't have to have fear, but we do need to move forward in faith, building upon true and correct direction. And we as individuals can get that direction. Each one of us can. Does it have to come through some other book or some other party or some other seer? Those things massively can help. But I promise, if we're in the right spirit doing the right things, and even if we're not, we can literally still connect.
You know what? Jimmy and High Res got it right. This is a war. This is a war on freedom. This is a war on children. This is a war on religion. This is a war on your ability to think. They want to control all information. They want to control what you think. And they're doing it all over the world, all over the world.
Faith over fear. Oh, God is always there when you got faith over fear. He'll answer all your prayers. So go and tell all the people that the Lord will lead the way. I put faith over fear every day.
I got God in my corner, there ain't a man that could stop me. I already gave my soul to him, not the Illuminati. Now I got an army of people that's right beside me. Heaven over Hollywood, evil can never stop me. Media want you nervous, they wanna make you feel worthless. The government is a circus, had to fight off these serpents just to get back to the surface. My soul is not for purchase, God's the only one I service, I'm his servant. Going through hardships in my darkest, I know he gon' take my hand. When life get hard, it's like a promise that you gotta trust his plan. Even if you don't understand, doesn't happen when you demand. They're gonna happen when the timing right. All your prayers, they gon' be answered. Have no fear when he near. He gon' take the wheel, then he still. When you think he gone, he appear. God, he feel when you cry tears. They said 2 weeks is on the spread, that's turning into 5 years. I don't believe in the devil, God the only one I fear.
Faith over fear. Oh, God is always there when you got faith over fear. He'll answer all your prayers. So go and tell all the people that the Lord will lead the way. I put faith over fear every day.
Yeah, I got faith over fear, only one I fear is God. We all make mistakes and we all have flaws. Wasn't following his laws, that's when I was so lost. I'd never sell my soul for a cost. When I thought I'd be better off dead, I heard a voice in my head. All the tears that I shed, all the blood that I bled. I kept my faith strong, people laid off just for not complying. Everything I prayed for, it came forward. God showed me the light. Hey, I never question the vision I'm giving, and I never question the journey. I never question the blessings and lessons he sent us, so I never worry. This is bigger than a song. This is my testimony to my family that's gone and to all my dead homies. I'm putting y'all on my back, even when times get bad. Won't forget where I came from. God brought me to where I'm at. Hey, the devil is a lie. Only trust the Most High. I got love for both sides. Matter of fact, there is no sides. Jimmy.
Faith over fear. Oh, God is always there when you got faith over fear. He'll answer all your prayers. So go and tell all the people that the Lord will lead the way. I put faith over fear every day. Was in the darkness and feeling godless. I was lost in an empty house. I kept on searching and now I'm serving the Most High and I'm better now. I was blinded, he helped me to see. I was hopeless, but now I found peace. I put faith over fear. Faith over fear. Oh, God is always there when you got faith over fear. He'll answer all your prayers. So go and tell all the people that the Lord will lead the way. I put faith over fear every day.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for your love and for your prayers and for showing up. Great questions, good dialogue. We look forward to a solid report out next week as well. We'll see you next Tuesday. And Susan, thank you for your guidance and recommendation. It's true and correct. Let's all do it. Much love. Bye-bye.